Welcome to The Big Picture. I'm Phil Arno. In the media today, we hear a lot about division and discrimination, chaos in general. Maybe later on in the show, we're going to get to a little bit of the why of all these things that are unrest. But first, I want to talk to something that doesn't have anything to do with chaos. It's law enforcement, and specifically the different kinds of law enforcement that we have here in Western New York and Erie County. You have state troopers, you have police departments, and you have the sheriff's office. And those are three very distinct, different organizations that have different responsibilities and answer to different entities. With me on this show is our Erie County Sheriff, John Garcia, and we're going to have a discussion basically about what makes the sheriff's office different than a lot of the other law enforcement agencies throughout the state. And just to preface it, you answer to the people. You are an elected official. Police officers, police chiefs, the state troopers and their hierarchy, they get their orders from the elected officials, and it's, to a great extent, it's policy that those elected officials just wish to impose. And it doesn't have anything to do specifically with the laws, although that's what it's supposed to be, but so often politics comes into it. And that's not the way it is with sheriff's departments, sheriff's offices throughout the country. There's quite a difference there, right?
That is correct. So the sheriff's office is a unique law enforcement agency. It's very complex, but for starters, it's the only law enforcement leader that's elected by the people and answers directly to the people. As you said, Phil, the superintendent of New York State Police is put in place by the governor, and the commissioner of Buffalo Police or any other city is appointed by the mayor, and the chiefs of police throughout Erie County are appointed by the supervisors. I'm elected by the people for a 4-year term. I'm a constitutional office. I'm serving as Erie County's 54th sheriff in the 205 years that we've been in office, and we just celebrated our 205th anniversary on February 4th this year. So, you know, for me, it's doing the right thing. It's about following the Constitution and the rule of law. Very simple.
You know, one of the examples that I can come up with is in various jurisdictions, they have sanctuary cities, sanctuary states, so on and so forth. And that really has nothing to do with enforcing the law as it's written. That is an opinion. We want to enforce certain laws, but not others. It's really a political decision.
It is, and it's made by elected officials that are also elected by the people. And they make decisions, just as you said, about a sanctuary city, about local police, be it the sheriff's office, be it, you know, local police departments not working with our federal partners in ICE, but working with the FBI and DEA and ATF and everybody else, but not working with ICE because that's the, you know, national fight that is going on right now, the atmosphere. However, as the sheriff of Erie County, you know, I follow the Constitution and the rule of law.
You know, in the media, and I've been a member of the media for all my adult life, and I'm almost embarrassed to say it, but in the media, the story that you get isn't always, or isn't necessarily the reality of what goes on in the real world. You know, you hear stories about ICE coming in and kidnapping children and doing, you know, taking, you know, law-abiding citizens and squirting them away. And there's all kinds of stories about that where it's embellished to make certain law enforcement look like bad guys. And that's, you know, it's almost like a campaign that's run by certain entities that for an agenda, for a personal political agenda.
That's an understatement, that the media is running with that narrative. And what we saw in Minneapolis and Minnesota was that their local law enforcement agency was told by, be it the supervisor, the county executive, the governor, not to work with ICE in their mission of removing illegal immigrants, which we've done under President Trump, all the way back to President Clinton and further back. You know, a crime was committed, and the removal process was standard. So it's easier to work with our federal officers because the local police departments, the sheriff's offices, the state troopers know the local better than the feds that are coming in. So if they would have worked together with their federal partners, those issues would have never happened.
Well, you know what? I want to get to the Erie County Sheriff's Office for specifically things that are going on. You know, Erie County has close to 1 million people. You know, you would think, based on general impressions, that we're in an area that's well behaved. You know, we have, you know, we don't talk about riots a lot, and we don't have a lot of, you know, violence that is, you know, dominating the news. Mm-hmm. But there are some problems. And before we came on the air, you talked to me a little bit about car thefts, for instance. Can you talk to that?
Yes. So I got to tell you, we have 1 million people in Erie County, and the vast majority of the people are great people. We live in a wonderful county with wonderful people, with roots. Everyone knows each other. We refer to Erie County as a small living room. However, we are now having a tremendous, I'm not going to say uptick, surge in property crimes. The biggest of all are car thefts, and they're happening no longer just in Buffalo. They're happening in Clarence, in Elma, in Orchard Park, in Grand Island, and so forth. And that's because I feel, because there's no consequences and no repercussions for those that are committing the crimes. We'll arrest an individual 1, 2, 3, 4 times. On the 4th time, he has 3 warrants, because the previous 3 arrests, he never showed up for court. Because people no longer go to jail, Phil. They get an appearance ticket and they're on to commit another crime. That's how it is. What I could say is this, is that now that we know this, we have to make our public aware that they cannot leave their keys in their car anymore. They cannot leave their doors open like we used to do so years ago. And if you have a valuable item, please don't leave it in the back seat of your car, because if a criminal sees that, the risk reward for them will be, even if your car is locked, they'll smash your window, they'll take your laptop or anything else of value.
Now, is this mostly in public places like parking lots and, you know, plazas and so on, or do these people go around neighborhoods just looking for opportunities, cars and driveways?
Phil, this happens about 15 feet away from your front door. People will come into your driveway, they'll come into your backyard. Listen, Amherst, Cheektowaga, Tonawanda, West Seneca, Hamburg, everybody is getting hammered with car thefts, car break-ins. And again, why is it happening now? And it didn't happen 10 years ago, and it didn't happen 20 years ago to this extent, is because when you and I were growing up, we were held accountable for our actions, you know? And that's not happening anymore. So when there's no repercussions of you having to maybe spend a night in jail or a couple of nights, you're going to do it over and over again.
You know, if you are behaving badly and there's no consequences, you tend to behave badly more. It's like, you know, when you're growing up, like you say, as a little kid, if there was no punishment for doing something wrong, then it says, hey, you know what? Why not?
Oh my God, if your teacher ever called home, and I was, you know, the utmost respect to teachers, or a neighbor would see you doing something, you know, that you shouldn't be doing and called your parents, that was enough. I would hope the police would get involved before my parents did. But it's different now. It's, there's, with bail reform, with, and listen, and with bail reform, there should have been some sort of bail reform, because what we saw is a lot of people that were in our custody, and they were in possession of a crack pipe, and they had drug addiction, and they were in our custody for over a year. That's not necessary, right? But for people that are committing crimes over and over and over, and I'm talking about burglaries, and I'm talking about assaults, serious assaults, they should be taken off the streets, and the victim shouldn't have to worry about the individual that just broke in their house being back out there.
And what you're basically talking about is common sense. This is something that our society, for whatever reason, has migrated away from publicly. Especially leaders in our society have migrated away from common sense. Maybe because it's not as popular, or it doesn't get as many votes. I'm not quite sure what the logic is behind it, but that's what we're dealing with these days.
So common sense, everyone I talk to around Erie County, they tell me the same thing you just said, Phil, is that a lot of the elected officials are lacking common sense when it comes to some of the legislation, laws, and so forth. You could rest assured that the Erie County Sheriff's Office is going to be using common sense. For us, it's right down the middle. Follow the Constitution, the rule of law. It doesn't matter what affiliation you have with a political party, religious affiliation, gender, race. It does not matter. We follow the law, and the people want accountability. They want to make sure that they're enjoying their lives and their kids are safe, their parents are safe, they're not having to worry about their parents be victims of scammers, they're not worried about their kids being abducted, they're not worried about their property or their valuables being stolen, because for a lot of people, many of us, if not all of us that have a car, it's our mode of transportation. We take our kids to school, we go to work, we take our parents to doctor's visits and so forth. So when you don't have your car for a few days, it's a huge inconvenience in your life. And what we're seeing, again, I know a lot of people use the word uptick, okay? It's a surge. And I know a lot of people, a lot of politicians are saying that gun violence, not people violence, gun violence, they blame the gun, is down. We had a couple good weeks of sunny weather, and I think almost every other day somebody in the city of Buffalo was shot. Yeah,
we're just about out of time for this segment, but I want to leave you with this. And we talked about common sense, and that goes to our leaders, and just the connection is it goes to the politicians. And when you see an ad, for instance, for a politician running for an office, we used to have a common sense part of that ad. It was, this is what I'm going to do for my office and the people that I serve in this area. Lately, every ad that I've seen, every ad, whether it's local, state, national, has not been about, this is what I'm going to do for our people locally. It's, I'm running against the President of the United States. What that has to do with a state senator or a state representative or a mayor, or it's not common sense. So you wonder, just think about that when you see a political ad. What is he telling you? What is she telling you? Does it make sense in what they're trying to get across for their particular office that they want to occupy? Anyway, we're going to be back. We're going to talk about this and more about the Sheriff's Office when we come back. We'll see you in just a minute. Welcome back to The Big Picture. My guest is Erie County Sheriff John Garcia, and we're talking about common sense. We're talking about the Sheriff's Office, a little bit about politics. One of the things I wanted to ask was, as Erie County Sheriff, You are law enforcement. You're the chief law enforcement official in Erie County. You are in charge of an entity that has close to 1,100 people working. You know, when somebody does something that, you know, isn't approved by the sheriff's office, you have to deal with it. You have to deal with the law enforcement end of it. You have to deal with the personnel end of it. There are so many different hats that you wear. How can you balance that?
Well, I think it's easy. You know, you're professional law enforcement. As a professional law enforcement individual, I always follow what is right to do. So we have police services where we cover 9/11 calls throughout 600 square miles of Erie County. And we do so with 180 deputy sheriffs. That's a very small number of people. Then we have not one jail, we have two jails. And they're both very antiquated, and it's a very, very difficult job. And we've done a great job of recruiting and retaining people to work in those jobs. Aside from that, we also do the civil enforcement, all the court paperwork, and we provide a regional resource for all those law enforcement agencies throughout Erie County, the smaller ones that don't have bomb techs, that don't have arson investigators, canines, that don't have hostage negotiators, SWAT teams. So we're a force multiplier for a lot of the other agencies, and we all get along fantastic. Erie County is a wonderful place to live. It's a wonderful place to raise your children, to work. We all get along very well.
You know, just a short story. I spent 20 years in Los Angeles, and, you know, covering the news there, I interacted with police all the time. And I had a conversation once with one of the lieutenants there, and it was after a disturbance, a riot or something, and then I asked him how many people they had on patrol at any given time. You know, there are 10 million people in Los Angeles County. And, you know, they have 7,000, at the time they had 7,000 officers employed. And he said, well, take a guess, how many do you think we have on patrol at any given moment? And I said, I don't know, maybe 1,000, you know. He said, 200. We have 200 officers between vacations and shifts and sick, you know, calls and whatever. There are 200 cars on the road with an officer at any given time for 10 million people. And so people would be shocked to hear that. And just, you know, by comparison, you have 180 deputies. At any given point during the course of a day or a night, you know, there's 3 shifts and there's sick calls and there's vacations, and can't have that many people on patrol.
No, those 180 are, you know, a mix of people that work in the civil division, that are detectives, you know, that work at 9/11. So, you know, I won't tell you how many are actually working, you know, but I got to tell you this. What does that say? Is that most of the people in Erie County, as you were saying in Los Angeles, are good people. Yeah. That maybe don't need police services for a 9/11 call. But what's happening now is, as you see, and I think, I don't know if it happened after COVID or some of the legislation that came out of Albany, but I see people that are speeding through red lights, going around school buses. We get that a lot more. That are, like I said earlier, you know, car thefts, breaking into cars, petty larceny from stores. I don't know. I don't even know how some of these stores are still in business. Obviously, Rite Aid is no longer in business, but you know, I get people telling me I'm waiting in line at a certain store, retail store. Meanwhile, somebody's just running out with their shopping cart. There's no repercussions, Phil. There's no accountability. You know, because we can't have a police officer on every block. So we depend on our people being our eyes and ears out there. And also what I want to say is that legislation in Albany has made it very difficult on witnesses. On people that come up and say, that's the guy who did it, you know, whatever, because now their name is put all through the prosecution and defense paperwork.
You know, it's interesting. I was on the Sheriff's Office website, and I looked at some of the things that you have listed on the website. And there's a tip line that you have, I believe, and there's also a section that you can click on where there are list of outstanding warrants, you know, people who are basically wanted and they're on the loose, and you have a picture and so on. People can visit, and I'm not sure how many do, but you've got a great website, and it offers insight into a lot of the different things that go on in the area.
Yeah, there's information on that website regarding some of the services that we provide. Obviously, we do the background investigation for all the pistol permits that come through Mickey Kern's office, for the exception of the town of Amherst and a couple other smaller towns. I believe it's Evans and maybe Blaisdell that we don't do. And I got to tell you, it's incredible. I mean, how many people are applying for pistol permits through Erie County. Aside from that, you know, again, you know, there's inmate information, there's jail hours information, there's information out there on how many, you know, people are outstanding warrants, and that's going on, Phil, because people are not going back to court, and they're not showing up. So all of a sudden, there's all these people outstanding on out there that we're looking for. And, you know, the legislation out of Albany has not been kind to common sense law enforcement.
Yeah, you know, I'm going to have Senator Patrick Gallivan on in a future show, and we're going to talk about Albany, and we're going to talk about the way things are run in the state in general. But it can't be very easy to deal with. I mean, a lot of the things that your budget goes to is mandated from Albany, and it's not paid for by Albany. So it comes into your budget to comply with things that Albany tells you you have to do with your operation.
We have, I'm going to say, basically every mandate that comes out of Albany is unfunded. So the taxpayers of Erie County are having to foot the bill for the taxes. This state just taxes you to death. I mean, we are, you know, between the taxes, the utility bills that we're paying now, and listen, there's a super majority of Democrat rule in Albany. The governor is a Democrat. The Attorney General is a Democrat. The state controller is a Democrat. Both senators are Democrat. And you know, what I see is we're at a crossroads. And are we going to have our kids staying here in New York State? Are we going to be able to afford all the taxes? And they don't come with better services. You know, we're not seeing that. We're seeing that, you know, our utility bills are going up by 70%. Now, we live in a very energy-rich state. Between Niagara Falls and the gas reserves that we have, we shouldn't be paying that much. So the system is broken, and I hope that the people rethink the way they vote.
Yeah. So we've got about 3 minutes left. If you know, if there's something about the sheriff's office that most people in Erie County don't know, what might you bring up as a service or you know, an informational you know, tidbit that you want people to know about the sheriff's office?
That we're the people's office. I'm an elected official. I'm elected by the people of Erie County to serve the people of Erie County. Everything we do is to provide the best service and protection possible while being fiscally responsible. We are there to help out every town and village, to be a force multiplier, to give them an advantage of helping curb the crime wave that we're having. Criminals do not have borders. Neither does law enforcement in Erie County. We're there to help each and every person. But, you know, it's a very complex agency because, you know, you were talking about wearing different hats. You know, you have the police side, you have the two jails, you have the civil, you have everything else in between. And also, obviously, I'm an elected official, so somebody could say, you know, the sheriff is a politician. I'm a politician in that I run for office every 4 years on my record. If people say, hey, you know, Sheriff Garcia is not doing a good job, then I don't get reelected. My promise to the people was to modernize this office, to bring it into the 21st century, to ensure that our deputies are not behind a desk, they're out on the road, to make sure that we retain people and not have people that work in the jail go work at Napa Auto Sales because the conditions are so bad. So, you know, we're there for the people. Any phone call that comes in gets answered, or a call goes back to the person. But I guarantee you that we have the best staff in all of New York State, and we want to make the Erie County Sheriff's Office the shining star of law enforcement.
Well, you know, Erie County Sheriff's Office is the largest sheriff's office in New York State, and that's kind of surprising given downstate, you know, the population down there. But you are part of the community. Beyond being a law enforcement agency, we have an explorers unit, you know, for young people who want to be involved in knowing about law enforcement. We have, you do boating safety and patrol. We have a new stadium, okay, and you guys are there to help protect the people who are using the stadium for whatever function that comes up, whether it's a Buffalo Bills game or whatever. So there's a lot of community involvement in the sheriff's office.
You'll see the sheriff's deputies at every event this summer, from the Taste of Buffalo to Eden Corn Fest to the Italian Festival, the Irish Day Parade. We are, again, a force multiplier with all the towns, cities. And as you said, you know, we're responsible for the safety and security of the fans at the Bills games. K-Bank Arena, we had a great run with the Sabres. We had the NCAA. Our deputies are out there. Our K-9 explosive dogs are out there. You know, you were talking about the Explorers. What a great program. You know, our we have the 2 boats out there that cover 90 miles of coastline in Erie County, and we're there to ensure that people are doing what's right and not being reckless and driving or operating their boat on the water. It's all about safety, Phil. But I got to tell you, the Explorers program is fantastic. I'm glad you brought it up. The Mounted, we're outside the convention center for every single event. Make sure that people get to their car safely and back to the convention center and so forth. It's our reserve division, which you know very well. And if it wasn't for our reserve division that was created decades ago, and it brings a lot of people with expertise that law enforcement we don't have, and that's another additional resource that we have. I am so proud to be the sheriff. I'm so proud that I live and was raised in Erie County. We're great people here, great people.
Well, you know, that's all the time we have for this program, but it's all about common sense. It's all about service to the community. And it's all about quality of life in Erie County. And I want to thank John Garcia, our sheriff, for taking part in the program. And, you know, we'll see you next time on The Big Picture. We appreciate you watching. We appreciate you watching WBBZ-TV. Thank you.